What do you believe right now that's making you feel this way? And when you analyse it, you realise how irrational you can be at times.
Every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
It's not sales per se, but the outcome of it is because people get to know you, they get to see you.
But, what's the culture like at the business? What do we stand for, the values?
I've got to tick that box on my personal development program I don't really want to be here.
Scaling up a business isn't easy. If it were, we wouldn't have less than 4% of businesses scaling beyond 10 employees or around £1 million turnover level, and less than 1% beyond 50 employees. But the contribution that we make as owner-managers to our economies is immense and should never be underestimated. Yet it can be a tough gig for all of us at times, and only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And through ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things a little easier. We interview guests who have been where you are now and may have faced some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked for them, as well as what didn't. And we've also combined many of the lessons from these interviews and also through working with hundreds of owner managers over the last 10 years or so into a practical scale-up handbook that we've called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, or ESUS. And it's for owner managers like you and me as we navigate our own scale-up journey. And you can order a copy through your favourite online book retailer or by going to all the W's, esusgroup.co.uk, www.esusgroup.co.uk. You're definitely going to want to listen to this episode of ScaleUp Radio. It's the classic story, rags to riches, with going bankrupt in the middle of it and all sorts of fantastic lessons that have been learned along the way, right up to building a £70 million a year turnover business. This time on ScaleUp Radio, I interviewed Jeff Dewing, and Jeff is the co-founder and group CIO, or Chief Inspiration Officer, as he refers to himself at the end of the interview, of Cloud FM. And Cloud FM is not a radio station, as he's keen to point out at the beginning. It's all to do with facilities management. And this is packed full of really great lessons. I'm not going to spoil any of the story any further. I suggest you go across and listen to him. What I will do is put a link in the show notes to a scorecard that you may want to check out that is around leveling up your people habits, because a lot of what Jeff is talking about comes around to people and inspiring and in getting them engaged as employees. Jeff also refers to the power of peer groups. And if you'd like to know more about joining a peer group, then you can contact us at admin@biz-smart.co.uk. And that link again will be in the show notes. So let's go across to Jeff. So welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Radio. I'm here with Jeff Dewing, who is the co-founder and group CEO of Cloud FM. So, Jeff, welcome to ScaleUp Radio.
Thank you very much. And just for the benefit of ScaleUp Radio and listeners, it's not Cloud FM as in a radio station.
Yeah, so what is yes, it does sound a bit like it could be, doesn't it? So maybe we should start there then. What is Cloud FM?
So the FM stands for Facilities Management. And we've recently, and it's interesting because all of our clients only ever refer to us as Cloud. So we've now changed our approach and we're now rebranded as Cloud Facilities Management rather than Cloud FM to stop the confusion.
Okay, brilliant. And I'm sure many people know what facilities management is, but is it worth explaining to those that don't?
Yes, of course. It's a sexy word that was invented in the late 60s, where we've been fixing buildings and things in buildings since buildings were built, right? So someone decided, let's make it a bit more sexier than just building maintenance. Let's call it facilities management. And I guess if you can imagine going back the years where we was all in school, you had a caretaker. Well, you're not allowed to call them caretakers anymore. They're facilities managers. So I guess it's like window cleaners that are now vision technicians. So facilities management is a £200 billion industry in the UK alone. 1 in 7 adults work in the industry, which is a lot of people don't realise the size of the industry. Yeah. Basically, it's about buildings, organisations, corporates outsourcing all of the challenges they have in running and managing their buildings, and that's where facilities management companies come in.
Brilliant. And I know you've been through a really entrepreneurial journey, and you've seen probably just about everything there is to see in what it takes to be an entrepreneur and building and growing a business. Where's Cloud FM at now, or Cloud? Where's it at now?
Well, I guess the question is, why does Cloud FM even exist? Why did it start? And I've been in the industry since I left school, in small owner-managed, middle-sized owner-managed, large, and then corporate. And what I found was that the industry, of which you can imagine is hundreds of thousands of people, they're all fantastic people behaving badly. and they're not behaving badly because they're bad people. I'll qualify by saying they're all fantastic people, and I mean that. But they're operating in a bad environment. And therefore, if you operate in a bad environment, you become bad, you behave bad. If you're in a hostile environment, you become hostile. Yeah. So Cloud FM, and as a result of that, because of the type of person I am, the values I have and so on, my role was I couldn't just do the things that people were doing because that was what you did. I had to challenge what we were doing because it wasn't the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So therefore I was unemployable. I couldn't ever last more than 2 years because I was too disruptive, because I didn't agree with the way we were behaving. And as a result of that, I realised I couldn't turn the tanker. I was never going to turn the tanker. I'm flogging a dead horse. So I decided to start a business that was going to embryonically behave in a way that I believe everyone should behave. And its purpose was to restore trust in a failing industry by changing the rules and to influence everybody else to behave differently.
Excellent. Okay. And so take us back to then. So you said you had some successes beforehand, and then realized you got some things wrong, and you started again. So take us back through some of those.
Well, I've always been entrepreneurial. I don't know why, in my genes, I guess. And it all goes back to, I guess, my dad, who ran his own business for as long as I can ever remember as a child. And he was always trying to fix problems for other people. And that's what I believed entrepreneurs were about. Although I didn't know that at the time. I was obviously just living what I believed that life was. And then at the age of 24, when I realised again, even at that stage, I was watching the company I worked for was just not solving any problems for anybody. It was just nurturing its own needs and the people within the business needs. And I just didn't see the point in that. If we're not fixing things for other people or helping other people have a better life in one form or another, well, then what's the point? So I decided at 24 to start my own business. And it was just contracts at that time, installing air conditioning, because that was my skill set. And that business grew from 0 to 5 million quid in 3 or 4 years. And I was living like, you can imagine, like a king, big houses, big cars, enjoying a young family, everything. Life was great, apart from I was always a workaholic. I always worked 7 days a week.
Right.
And then I couldn't get beyond the 5 million, and I started employing different people, realised I had to employ people better than me if I wanted it to grow. Brought in people that I thought were better than me, that were in very high positions in corporates. And after a period of time, they just added no value, and I just got it wrong. And I got bored. I just couldn't solve the problem. So I then got presented with the opportunity to buy a football club, which was a non-league football club or semi-professional football club. And what I'd found, and I'd helped the local village football club for about 6 months or a year, and I found that I could motivate these players, not as a manager, I was never the manager, but just sort of creating the right environment for them to thrive, and sort of, motivate, inspiring them is the best word, because you can't motivate somebody, you can only inspire them. Right. And I guess that encouraged me to think, well, if I can do it at this little club, maybe I can do it at this great big club. So I bought the club, and I just got immersed in it. I found that I could get the same group of people to create an output 1,000 times better than they did before, just by inspiring them and creating the right environment, creating the conditions for success. And then since I'd bought them, I hadn't won anything for 50 years. That was a laughing stock in actual fact of our town. And I had them for 5 years. And in that 5 years, we won everything we could touch. We was on Sky Sports in the FA Vase. We'd won the league twice. So it was and it was just continual success. But yet it was all the same people. Mm-hmm. And that sort of really taught me some lessons about some of my skill sets that perhaps I hadn't realised. But whilst doing that, I took my eye off the ball of the business. I left people to run the business. And suddenly one day I got called into the office and they said, Jeff, we've run out of money. And I said, well, how can that be? And we went through the process, and sure enough, the business was in dire straits and it was unrecoverable. which wasn't their fault. It was my fault because I'd left them completely on their own and had taken my eye off the ball. So as a result of that, I lost the business and ended up in bankruptcy.
Right.
And that sort of was the lowest part of my life. I lost my house. I lost, the 2 or 3 cars I had at the time, lost the football club. But more importantly, the impact on me in terms of shame, embarrassment, disappointment, all the things you can imagine, having to face up to my parents that were very proud people, were spending all their time saying, isn't it wonderful how successful Jeff's been? And in reality, it came crashing down. And that was the toughest point in my life.
I can only, I can imagine that must be incredibly tough. So how did you go around picking yourself up from there?
If I'm honest, I went hiding for 6 months because of the fact of the football club. I was very well known in the town I lived in, so I couldn't go out without people saying, "Oh, hello, Jeff," or "What's happened to you?" or "I read the news," or whatever. So I went hiding. I was ashamed. I'd let the family down, the wife, the kids, it was. I won't say I was depressed. I've had the benefit of never suffering that problem, but if there was anything close to depression, that was it, because it was really, I've got no idea. But then one day, I just looked in the mirror and said, you got to sort yourself out, because if nothing else, you've got to find a way to support your family. And that's when I thought, well, rather than trying to feel that I know it all and go and do it all again, I need to go and find out what went wrong. I need to understand what went wrong. I need to go back on the learning journey. Yeah. So I went back into the employment world, and luckily enough at that point, because of my experience, I was able to secure senior level roles. And I went back into employment for 6 years and worked for different types of businesses, ending up in the corporate world in the same industry that I've been in, and realised that all the problems I was sort of facing before was still there. In fact, there was amplified 1,000 times in terms of chaos. But I did actually get to meet different types of people working in different types of environment that helped me understand why I couldn't find the right people before. And it also helped me realise that I felt during my journey that despite finding the right people, I still needed to control. And that was the bit I got wrong. It's never about control. Everyone thinks it's about control. Everyone thinks it's about losing control. It's all the insecurities of losing control. But it was never about control. And that was the biggest lesson I'd learned. It was about true collaboration. It was about freedom. It's about helping people be their best selves. And it's not about having something to say about everything. It's about truly empowering people. And that was what I learned during my journey. And through those lessons, plus many others, most of which are in the book, helped me decide it was time to go again with this incredible new knowledge.
Okay. So when you said before that you managed to get the previous business to 5 million, but got stuck there, you're putting that down to not being over controlling, or what are you putting that down to?
Oh yeah, believe it, because unfortunately, especially when you're a young entrepreneur, you're not taught entrepreneurialism. You're not taught how to be a businessman. You have to learn as you go along, right? And one of the things that we all believe when we start a business is we know it all, and sometimes we're very clever. We've learned a lot of things, and we've worked very hard, and we've had to become, in my case, it was facilities management. But I also had to be a lawyer. I had to be an accountant. I had to be an IT specialist. I had to be everything. Yeah. I had to be head of HR and manage people. So you learn all these skills at lightning pace. The downside is you think that you know it all and you don't know anything. And the bit that I guess that was really important to me was it wasn't about controlling. It was about saying, look, you've brought in somebody to manage your business development, or you've brought in somebody to manage your accounting. Let them do it. Just don't pretend that you know better than them. And if anything, spend your time learning from them, not trying to educate them. And that's where most young entrepreneurs get it wrong. They think that is their role and it's a sign of strength. And it's not. It's a sign of massive weakness. Yeah.
And we believe that we should be the one that is telling everybody what to do, and everybody should be following, because we're the one that set the business up. It's our business, and therefore we should be the one that And it's as you say, that gives that puts a ceiling really on the business, because there's only so much that we can control, and we're not we're not allowing other people to flourish within that business. So how do you? Because there's often this question between delegation and abdication, isn't there? it's all very well saying, yeah, I'm gonna let the accountant do a great job, or the HR person, and I'm going to let them run. But equally, we don't want to just completely abdicate and say, well, I'm not interested. Go off and do it. So how do we balance those things?
Well, I guess it's realising that you can delegate authority, you can never delegate responsibility.
Okay.
So essentially, you have to have an interest because of your role and responsibility that says, no, I'm going to let you run, but I need to know what's happening. I need to know what you're doing, how you're doing it. Not because I'm going to tell you differently, but I need to be aware. And I need to be in touch with all the things that are happening around me. I don't need to decide on them or focus on them or own them, but I do need to know what's going on. I think I read a great book called Turn the Ship Around, which is a story about a naval fleet in America with 70 odd submarines. And there was this one submarine, it was the worst performing submarine in the entire fleet. They couldn't retain a crew for more than one tour. And
I guess they could retain him probably for at least a tour.
yeah. Well, they couldn't abandon ship in the middle of the ocean. Yeah. And there was this, the guy that was training to be a captain of a submarine. It's his dream. He worked hard and so on. Anyway, he got his captaincy and was told, "Great, you're now ready to get a submarine. Fantastic." And they then told him what submarine he was. And he went, "Oh no, you give me the worst performing submarine in the fleet, and I'm a new captain." Anyway, cut the long story short, and you'll have to read the book to get the full story. But the gist was that he went into the submarine, and within the first tour, it became the highest performing submarine in the fleet.
Yeah.
And what he did was he went in and said, "Look, I'm a captain. I've been taught. I know all the stuff, how submarines are supposed to operate and stuff. But I do not know how the nuclear plant works. I do not know how the missile strike works. You know this submarine better than I do. You've been here. So I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. But what I am going to ask is you just let me know what's going on." So in other words, he used this phrase that says to all of his staff, wherever they work, you never come to me for permission. You come to me and you say, "I intend to do this, Captain, just so you know," which gave me the opportunity to say, "Well, let me understand why you're doing that." Right. And suddenly he empowered these people and they became accountable. By becoming accountable, they took responsibility for everything that happened. And therefore they cared more about it working than they ever did before. And that was the principle of how he changed it. So it was about truly accepting the fact that there are people, certainly in certain areas, that are far better than you.
And that's, I think that's David Marquette, isn't it?
It is David Marquette, yeah.
Okay. And yes, that he vowed never to give an order again, didn't he? And to instead basically give intent. Yes, I think it's a great way of looking at it. And then a couple of other things around there, aren't there, about because within a submarine, he talked about that trying to get them to what am I thinking now? So you've got that, and that safety aspect. And
well, he created collaboration. He enabled people to talk to each other and said, "What do you think? I want to do this." He created true collaboration, and that's when people became their best selves. People were taught that they didn't have to have all the answers; they had to have the responsibility to go seek the answers. Yeah,
and he puts it beautifully as well, and the idea that was it 219 crew members or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And he's saying, the old naval model or the perception of a military commander is you lead from the top and you give orders and you're supposed to be the clever one. He said, how can I be cleverer than 219 people and come up with all of the things that everyone needs to do? It's just a bonkers way of running a submarine. Well, as you said, it's the same with a business, isn't it? It's bonkers if we think we've got to be the one that's making all the decisions.
Yeah. And one of the lessons I took from that was probably one of the most single powerful lessons I've ever taken. But as I sort of went through that journey of knowledge after I'd started the business, because I'm now experiencing growing from 5 people to 400 people in a space of 3 or 4 years, I had to learn very, very quickly how I manage these people and didn't have attrition and so on and so on. How am I going to do things differently and not do the same thing and get a different result? So the lesson I took from that is that someone said, and I knew this in my head anyway because I've thought about it and gone through reading the book, but then someone said to me a few months ago, "How would you define a good COO or a great CEO?" And I said, a great CEO is someone that never makes a decision. And my focus after the David Marquette book and that experience was, if I can get to the stage where I don't have to make any decisions, then I've cracked it. And because when your team make the decisions, they take ownership. And when they take ownership, they will almost always deliver the outcome.
So how do you practically, how do you train yourself to do that? And how do you train your team that that's the way that you want to work?
So again, it's really easy to sit back and say, "Oh, yeah, we just read a few books and you know what you're doing." Well, which is clearly not the case. So what I also learned was the recognition that I didn't know it all, the recognition that I had this incredible desire to learn, whereas before I thought I knew it all. And I suddenly looked around and thought, how do I get more knowledge? How do I learn? And then I got introduced to the concept, which a lot of people know about, some may not. It's the principle of peer groups.
Okay, yep.
So I joined a group called Vistage. Vistage is a global organisation with 25,000 CEOs across the globe, all in groups of 10 and 12 people. They meet every month and they share knowledge and wisdom and they help each other on their journeys and so on and so on. So I joined this peer group, and that peer group taught me incredible things, because within that peer group, you also get to have world guest speakers. I mean, Simon Sinek is one of Vistage speakers, for instance. I mean, you get real high-class speakers. And you learn an awful lot from these speakers. And one of the things, there's a couple of things I learned. One was always be the last person to speak, because that way you get to hear everybody else's views first. And the next thing is, how do you spot the leader in the room? So if you go in a meeting room of 10 people, how do you spot the leader? The leader is the person asking great questions and never giving any answers, because you're taking the people on the journey. So I started learning these incredible lessons. Now, a lot of this stuff I could argue or would argue that I knew to a fashion. What I didn't know was how to articulate what I was doing or what I was thinking. And what Vistage done through that peer group and through great speakers, they helped me learn to articulate something with ease. So if someone said to me, how did you get all those people to do those things? I'd have gone around the houses and said, well, I did this, and I sort of had a chat with them here and had a chat with them there. Whereas now I can say, be the last person to speak. You end up articulating it so much better, and then you can transmit it so much better and cascade it through your other managers, middle managers, and so on. And then it makes it so easy. You simplify the complicated, and then you give people absolute clarity, and then you give them the tools to actually do the things they need to do.
Yeah, and it's also building on one of Stephen Covey's essential habits, isn't it? The seek first to understand and then be understood.
Then be understood, correct, yeah. And loads of other myriads that begin with the end in mind and behave like you've already achieved it. And there's a myriad of stuff that just gets your mindset in the right place. Great.
Okay, so take us a little bit on the journey then with Cloud FM. So you start up. I think you start up with your co-founder. You start up with, was it Derek?
Derek, yeah.
Great. So just take us through those early stages.
So I was working at a big corporate. I employed 50,000 people when I was European operations director. And I'd known Derek from a previous life, who was operating, or he was running the capital investment program for Boots the Chemist, which was about £300 million a year. And I'd worked with him previously on that project in another life. And then suddenly I'm sitting in my offices in Canary Wharf and was asked to attend a meeting for a company that were coming in to pitch to us on consultancy services. So I said, okay. So this team had all got ready, and there was a big glass office in Canary Wharf, and then and they was all waiting for me. So I then walked in, and everyone said, good morning, good afternoon, whatever it was. And I looked around and said, Derek, what are you doing here? Anyway, so it was Derek that was leading this consortium of consultants to try and pitch for a new way of doing technical business. So we let them do their pitch and so on, and I said, okay, well, this is how you can engage with us. And then I showed them the technology that I'd built, because I was a coder at the time. And then Derek was blown away by what we showed him. And to cut a long story short, that picture finished, and he said to me, you got time for a coffee? And I said, yeah. So we went down for a coffee, and he said to me, what you've just shown me in technology is what's been missing from my entire business model. Why don't we do this together? And that was the start of the conversation. And that was basically the reason we both started Cloud FM.
Excellent. And so what was the positioning of Cloud FM then? What was going to make you different from all the other facilities management companies that are out there? Because I imagine if it's a £200 billion market in the UK, you're not the only facilities management company, are you?
No, of course not. No, of course not. So there was one common thread with every facilities business, whether there was a 10 million turnover or a 10 billion turnover. And that was, they all had technology to a fashion. They was all recording information on IT, but all they'd done was they digitized their rubbish processes.
Yeah.
And therefore, the data, you could never trust any data. And the difference was that whatever data you ever entered, whether it be somebody else within your organization or you, everybody could tamper with the data when they felt the need that it should be. Not necessarily to tell lies, but to correct things that they thought were wrong. Or I'll give you one example. So an engineer might be on site fixing something, and he'd write on his PDA, the manager really upset me. He wouldn't give me a coffee when I asked for it, so I'm never coming back here again. Right, as an example. Mm-hmm. Now, an administrator would think, well, I can't let that stay on the system. If the client sees that, they'll want to cancel the contract. So they would change it.
Yeah.
And you can understand why they might want to change it. But what's now happened is you've changed the truth. Mm-hmm. And you've said something that now isn't true, right? And it's not relevant to what was actually said. Yeah. And as a result of that, by people tampering with the data meant you couldn't trust the data because it was not true. People were changing it all over the place for reasons that they felt was right. So the philosophy when we built Cloud FM was we're going to build some technology that nobody can tamper with. Okay. Nobody can adjust or delete or edit or hide. And you might not like what you see, but you at least know it as the truth. Mm-hmm. And in our scenario, in our sort of situation where I just explained that scenario, if an engineer did the same on our technology, we can't change it or hide it or edit it. We go back to the engineer and say, don't say that. Don't behave like that. Try and behave like this. And you re-educate the engineer. You do not cover up what's been said, because then you don't have accurate, robust data. So our philosophy at the time was, the industry when we started was saying things like, when they were pitching or bidding or trying to win work, they'd be saying things like, we are looking for reverse engineering or value add engineering, and all these buzzwords that went on, which were sort of fluff. What we did was, when we started a business, we said it's about transparency, it's about visibility, it's about robust, rock solid data. And about 4 years later, we were asked to, as a consultant, and analyse a tender of a big organisation that we weren't pitching for. We was just asked to be a consultant. And what was interesting, the big four came in that were pitching, and they'd all started, they dropped the language of added value and value engineering, and they started saying it's about transparency, it's about visibility, it's about robust data. So they was all using our messaging, right? And we were only this small little business by comparison. So what we did was we said, we're going to create an absolute, honest, transparent, robust organization where nobody can touch the data. That was a differentiator.
Yeah. Okay. So you started, you and Derek said, right, let's do this. So how did you get off the ground, and what were some of the milestones along the way?
So we started in 2012, and we went around pounding the pavements for 9 months. And because we'd come up with this solution that was a dream for those people that were in the industry, they just said, look, this is too good to be true, and therefore it must be too good to be true. Right. So trying to get the first client was extremely difficult. We eventually got the first client, which was a client called Republic Clothing, which most people remember. They since went bust, but at the time they was quite thriving. They had 120 stores. We secured Republic Clothing in the January of that year. And off we went. That was it. We was trading, and that was worth about £1 million a year to us.
Right. So that's really going to get to. So it's obviously, yeah. So you're asking somebody for a pretty significant investment. Hence why it's difficult to get that first client. Nobody else is seeing anybody else using it.
Well, no, of course. Well, I guess yes and no to that question. Republic were already spending £1 million a year keeping their buildings running. So all they'd done was they decided to spend that £1 million with us rather than somebody else, and they believed that our technology may have given them an added value, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't an investment because it's not upfront payment or anything. It was just the normal way of 30-day payments and so on and so on.
Yeah, it's that trust thing, though, isn't it? Though, because it's like
course,
they obviously balanced the risk of the fact that we're prepared to take a bit of risk because we like this new solution, but what are we going to lose? We're spending £1 million over here. We got something that kind of works. It doesn't kill us. It might not be brilliant, but it doesn't kill us. But if we go with you, it could kill us if we get it wrong.
Of course.
So it's that trust and reputation, which is why it's difficult to get that first.
Of course, and of course, when you first start, you don't have a reputation. Yeah. Right? So you don't have credibility. You don't have credit history. Right, because you're a brand new business.
Yeah. How did you establish that with them? How did you get over that?
Well, again, something I've since learned. I knew it at the time, didn't know why or how, but I can now articulate it. we've all got two parts to our brain, right? We've got the neocortex and we've got the limbic brain, right? The neocortex is logical, language, 2 + 2 = 4, etc. The limbic brain is emotional, irrational, unconscious, subconscious. And both parts of the brain work simultaneously. And if you're going to buy a car or do a deal or commit to expending with someone or whatever, in what percentage terms does the neocortex make a decision, and what percentage terms does the limbic make the decision? Is it 20? Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? What do you think it is?
Well, I think it's probably largely the limbic, and then we use the rest of it to justify the decision that the limbic brain's made.
So the answer is 95-5.
95%, right? Yep.
95% of your decision to do something is entirely emotional. It's how you feel. It's your gut feeling. And therefore, what's the biggest influencer of that scenario? It is relationship. So what happens is the person that you're talking to decides if they like you and they can do business with you. That's what makes the decision. And you never make a decision. Another example is someone wants to buy a brand new car and it's £10,000. And they go, God, I love that car. I love that car so much. If I could have that car, my world would be made. And then they're in their office the next day, and in the car park, there is this exact same car that's only a day old, and it's for sale for £3,000. Does the person go and buy that car for £3,000 without asking any questions? No, they don't. And the reason they didn't buy that car, because the seller said, no, it's a day old. I've only just got it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not stolen. It's all completely registered. Why don't they buy it? Because it doesn't feel right. Something isn't right. And it's the emotional, not the logical brain that said, the logical brain says, this is £7,000 cheaper or £6,000 cheaper. What are you doing? Yeah. The limbic says something's not right. And that's what makes the decision.
Interesting. Okay, great. So we've got our first client. We've got Republic Clothing on board, worth $1 million. And is that in? Does the economic model work in terms of, is that recurring revenue model, subscription?
It's all recurring revenue. Yeah.
Yep. Great.
So we deliver a service and we invoice that service. They pay us a service. We then pay the supply chain, because we don't deliver anything. We are managing a supply chain, and we're managing a group of contractors that are not us, right? So, and those contractors are engaging through our technology that we've built. So the technology controls everything. It automates everything. So that was the model. But the model itself, you'd argue, is not dissimilar to any other model, except the transparency changed everything. Because if you can imagine, let's use Republic as an example. They go to a plumber and they say, can you come and fix our plumbing, please? And the plumber says, yep, no problem at all. But that plumber actually can't fix it, so they subcontract it. And that company can't fix it, so they subcontract it. So then in goes the company and fixes it. What then happens is the company actually done the work. The guy that done the work does his invoice for 50 quid. That goes to the next company who charges 75 quid, 100 quid, and so on. You get my point, right? You've got markup on markup.
Yeah.
And essentially now the client is paying 250 quid for a job that, had they have gone direct, would have been 50 quid. So you then sit and say, well, that's clearly not economical and it's inefficient. So what we did was we said, guys, and of course what was worse is most contractors would tell you they don't subcontract, when clearly they do. And there's nothing wrong with subcontracting if that's your business model. So what we did is we said to the contractors that we were doing business with, right, you're the contractor. Can you cover this work without subcontracting? Yes, we can. Great. That's fantastic. What's your hourly rate? £30 an hour, whatever it is. So we said, great, that's what it is. Now, no one can go onto any of our sites without using our technology, which was an app. You have to scan in and scan out, which means I can tell exactly how long that person was on site and how long they was off site. I can tell what their skill sets were, what they were. So I don't care if you subcontract 10 times. I'm only paying you an hour and a half at £30 an hour.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you're prepared to operate at a loss, that's your choice and your decision. But the client is only going to pay for the value spent on site, irrespective of how many times you've subcontracted. What that done was enabled us to reduce the client's spend by up to 30%, because 30% was wastage through subcontracting that no one knew about or could manage.
Yeah, phenomenal. So you were presumably able to prove that within Republic Clothing, which then enabled you to start to then branch out with other companies.
Well, once they say that, the crowd breeds the crowd, right? So once you've got that first name, then it becomes slightly easier. And then the more you get names, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. So what what were some of the milestones then along that journey from there? Because now we've got our first client. Now we're in scaling mode. What were some of the key things key inflection points perhaps along the way?
I guess with us, it was we decided a philosophy. We wasn't there to be able to say to everybody, look, we're the biggest company in the world. That was never our situation. What we wanted to do was to change an industry. And the only way we believed we could change the industry was to influence the industry. The industry on the whole, like the construction industry, were absolutely crying every day because of what they perceived to be poor margin. There's no margin. Everyone's driving margin down. It's all about margin. Mm-hmm. And what we were saying was, well, we're earning extremely healthy margins, reducing our client spend. What are you worried about? Why don't you sit back and ask yourself if you're doing it the right way or not? So we wanted to educate the industry on how to make healthy margin, which creates sustainability, but just be honest. Just face the music and be honest and deal with the real problems, not the perceived problems. And for us, we decided to have a small number of large clients. That was our philosophy, because with a small number of large clients, we established credibility because of the size of those clients. Yeah. And two is, we could prove the business case with large clients who would be prepared to shout from the rooftops that we'd achieved exactly what we said we would achieve. And that's what then created the momentum. And of course, despite the fact that it helped us grow as an organisation and it helped us grow substantially, what it also done was it started to influence the industry, which was the whole purpose of our existence.
Yeah. Great. So strategically, you got great positioning. You got that right. What about people challenges? You must then, as you're growing now, you must be thinking about who do we need to take on? And you mentioned some things about people earlier on at the beginning of the conversation. But what were some of your challenges around the people side of the business?
Surprisingly, very little challenge on people, because we seem to got the bit right from the very beginning. Again, from my previous learnings. First thing is, why do we exist? And the $1 million question is the Simon Sinek why, right? So all that came very early in our journey. So we had to establish why we existed. We knew why, but if I said to my board at the time, what's our purpose? They'd have spent 4 hours telling me, and they'd have all been right, and it'd all been a version of the truth, but you couldn't articulate it, right? Mm-hmm. So the first thing we had to do is establish our purpose in one phrase, which we achieved, and I won't tell you how long that took, but we did it. Yeah. And that was to restore trust in a failing industry by changing the rules. What then happened is, from that point forward, we realised that anybody we brought into our business, irrespective of their skills or their CV or who they'd worked for or their reputation, all we tested for was, do you believe what we believe? That was the $1 million question. Right. And they had to convince us that they believed what we believed. Because if they believe what we believe and they buy into the purpose, they will contribute to becoming an unstoppable workforce. And that's exactly what happened. We've never lost a senior manager in our entire 11-year history, because the people that came in believed what we believed. And that was what was important. And if they didn't, or they didn't convince us, they didn't join. Not because they're bad people, but we just weren't the right fit for them. Yeah. But that's about having a genuine purpose-driven business.
Yeah. Amazing. So, and on the cash side, funded by operations, by cash flow, I imagine, or did you have to take on funding?
So here's the next exciting piece, right? So when we started the business, we had no money. Yeah. We had no borrowings. We had no investment. We had no overdraft. So how did we grow from 1 to 70 million? $1 million question. Yeah. And the answer to the question is, we used our clients as our investors. And what that meant was, in the construction industry or the facilities management industry, the typical environment in the services industry is you do a job, you submit an invoice, you get paid 30, 60, 90 days later, right? Yep. That's the conventional way, and people will tell you that that's the only way. We create an environment that said to our clients, right, this is how we work, this is how we do it, this is what the benefit you get, this is the commitment we make, but we won't give you credit. You have to pay us in 24 hours. And then you'd have clients say, well, my CFO would never agree to that. And then we say, well, in that case, there's no point continuing, because that's one of our non-negotiables. Yeah. And a lot of them did say that. And we said, okay, I understand that. I completely get that. That just means you're not ready for us. And that's okay. Come back when you are. And then they say, hang on a minute, why are we not good enough for you? And we say, it's not about you not being good enough for us. It's about that's a non-negotiable. And invariably, 9 out of 10 times, people come back to us and said, we don't understand. Why is this so important? And we told them. And it's a bigger story, which is too complex to go into the detail here. But the general gist was worst case, I think the most credit we ever give anybody was 5 days. So we're raising invoices, where it be for 200 grand, £1 million, £2 million, whatever. And we're being paid either 24 hours later or 5 days later. We're not paying our supply chain for 30 days. So we now have negative working capital.
Yeah.
So that's how we grew. That's how we grew to that size without any investment.
Brilliant. And what a great lesson for all of us, because we all talk, or well, I said we all talk, but key focus is obviously on cash flow. We get sucked into, well, that's the way it's always done. You can't possibly change it. The idea of even getting them to come from 30-day, because we all know even 30-day terms is more like 60 or 90, depending.
Yeah, of course.
The client. But even people say, oh, we couldn't possibly get it from 30 to 15. Well, actually, let's do it the other way. Why don't we almost get paid upfront? For it? And just challenging that. And again, I'm not meaning to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing from the peer group working as well. Were you working with people from different industries in those peer groups?
Well, no, that model was built before I joined a peer group. And what's interesting is I'm the one now driving my peer group to say, why you accept it? Because they've all got cash challenges, right? Like most businesses have. And I say, well, why are you not doing something different? Oh, yeah, my industry wouldn't tolerate that, Jeff. I said, that's what everyone said about my industry. Yeah. Right? And so again, that is where they're getting value from the peer group, because there's people like me pressurising them. Yeah. That was one of the reasons why I was unemployable, because I didn't accept the status quo. I would never say that's how you do things. And I said, we don't like it, change it.
Superb. Excellent. So you've got this great business where all the people are bought into the core purpose. It's growing like mad. It's funding itself with its own cash flow, or using the client's cash flow to fund it. What happens next?
COVID.
Yeah.
Of which, apart from those people that suffered losses, which are excluded from this statement, obviously, but COVID was the single best lesson I or most businesses that are thriving have ever had. Right. Because it enabled us to face up to something we would never dream we'd ever have to face up to. And therefore what it created was spiritual learning, and it created resilience, a level of resilience we never thought we'd ever have to have. Yeah. And it also taught us how to expect the unexpected, and taught us how to prepare for the unexpected. So I guess to summarise that, our business was 90% restaurant industry when the COVID hit.
Oh, right.
And it was people like KFC, Pizza Express, Ask Zizi, and so on and so on. So on March the 20th, as you can imagine, every single one of those restaurants closed. Yeah. We were collecting £6.5 million a month from every one of our clients, or all of the summer of our clients. And in April, that £6 million dropped to 180 grand.
Wow.
That just fell off a cliff. Yeah. Because everybody panicked, everyone shut their checkbooks, understandably so. And of course, our supply chain that were used to receiving £4 million a month payment from us, suddenly getting nothing because we did the same thing. Yeah. So you had this panic and fear everywhere, understandably so. And then suddenly, as a team, we had to work out how on earth are we going to solve this problem. Mm-hmm. And my next big learning was, for the first time ever, where I was always, people, my exec board would always say to me, come on, Jeff, what are we going to do? And I would tend to be the driver of the ideas, right? And they, for the first time, experienced that they never experienced before. And I sat down and I said, I've got absolutely no idea. I'm losing, and I never lose sleep. I'm a great sleeper. I'm losing sleep. I know where to turn. I'm on the floor. I've got no idea. And I showed a level of vulnerability that I'd never showed in my life.
Okay.
And something incredible happened. My exec team stepped up 20 gears. Mm-hmm. And that's when I learned the power of vulnerability, authentic vulnerability.
Yeah.
And suddenly they started coming up with these incredible ideas. Now, in the meantime, I'd also learned to do something that I was forced to do. And that is, I had time on my hands so I could reflect. Everything was shut. Everyone was at home. I had little or nothing to do other than worry. So at that point, I'd been stuck in Portugal because we'd flown out for a week's holiday in March and we couldn't get back because of COVID. So, and we was lucky enough to own a house in Portugal. So I ended up spending my time in Portugal, and I'm lucky enough to have a balcony that overlooks the sea where the sun sets every night. So I'd sat on my balcony for 2 hours every single night for a year, just reflecting, just sitting and reflecting, something I'd never done before because I was always too busy. Mm-hmm. And the knowledge and information, the first thing that happens is your mind clears of anything because you're reflecting. It's a form of meditation, I guess. Although I'm not into meditation stuff, but this is a form of meditation. And my mind clears so much. Suddenly this stuff just started popping into my head because you'd cleared it of all the other rubbish. And I started coming up with these weird and wonderful ideas about stuff, of how we could overcome, how we could address, how we could resolve. And then I started sharing my exec team, who had also come up with incredible ideas because they'd done the same thing. Before we knew where we were, we had a dozen different plans for a dozen different scenarios of how we were going to manage not just ourselves, but our clients and our supply chain and our staff. And we just came up with these incredible ideas that basically solved every problem we could have dreamed of, whilst we were still in COVID. Mm-hmm. So that was a real lesson of how to go through a journey of responding to something that you had no idea you'd ever believe you could respond to, and we believed we had no right to survive this, and we actually in the first few weeks thought this was the end of it. It was all over. But that resilience and that need to thrive, not survive, was what drove us, and we came up with some incredible ideas which we executed, which has been the sole reason why we came out the other side bigger, better, and faster. And
how much do you put some of that down to the fact that you got such a strong core purpose that everybody had bought into?
It's 100% because of that. Yeah. Purpose-driven businesses are the athletes of any sport, basically. If it's true purpose and not fluff and writing on the wall, then by default it becomes unstoppable.
Because you'll find another way to achieve that purpose, won't you? Even if a block comes in the way, you'll find a way around it. I was talking to somebody yesterday who's an ex-Marine, and he used the phrase "adapt and overcome" a lot, because that's the Marine sort of one of the fundamental core sayings, and it's exactly that, isn't it? Once if you know really what the mission is, what you got to do, you will always find a way. You have to adapt, and you'll find a way then to overcome whatever that challenge is.
And what stops you doing that is when you don't truly believe.
Yeah. Right. And going back to what you're saying, you made sure every manager coming in could demonstrate and convince you.
They believe what we believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. Well, I think that's I think that's been a fantastic conversation. Are you all right for a couple of quick fire questions?
Of course.
Good. So, with everything now then that you've experienced, if you were to go back to your younger self, I mean, maybe it's when you first set up your first facilities management business. What would your advice be? What would you say to your younger self?
Stop thinking you know it all. You know nothing.
Right.
Learn.
Yeah.
Absorb. And then more importantly, I would umbrella it with, if you want to succeed in life, whether it be today, tomorrow, next year, next month, or whether you're 20 years old or 60 years old, be curious. Never stop being curious.
Yeah. Brilliant. Excellent. You've already mentioned David Marquette and Turn This Ship Around. Any other books or podcasts particularly that you'd recommend?
Well, certainly the Stephen Covey stuff, and the 7 Habits and Good to Great. Pixar was another one I thought was fantastic, and Creativity with Steve Jobs. There are loads of books. What I don't particularly subscribe to is teaching books. What I love are books that tell a story that's real, from which you gain a lot of insight.
Okay.
And I've got a list of stuff that I watch, and I think it's in fact there's so many, I'm struggling with saying the titles, but I must have read 50 books in the last 3-4 years.
Right. And you run your own podcast, which is doing the opposite. Are there any other podcasts that you would listen to?
I listen to a few. There's a one called The Prodcast, which is all about production, filmmaking and production. And although it's not really something that I aspire to be involved in, I am fascinated by the way production has evolved from the old days of flying actors and crews and scenes into Barbados to film an advert on some perfume, whereas now they can simulate any environment at any point with the actors and the camera crew in one place, just on technology in one studio, and it's pretty damn impressive. And the podcast is bringing in people that are the ex-CMOs of PepsiCo and Coca-Cola and L'Oreal, and they're explaining how their £10 million or £100 million budgets, they're achieving more now for 10 million because they're just doing it differently. So I listened to the podcast. I also listened to another one called Clowning Around, who's a guest. She's a guest speaker on a number of the circuits, and she's just a complete Fruit Loop. But and what she does is her mantra is to put fun at the heart of business. And she brings that to life incredibly well. Although if you listen to her podcast, you think, God, what mad woman is this? But she's really, really a clever lady at getting into your subconscious. And there's one or two others, yeah.
Yeah, good. What apps or bits of software? I mean, obviously you built your own with Cloud FM, but what apps or bits of software do you use personally that you found really useful?
It's really interesting because one of the things that has driven me mad all my life is, as much as I've loved software and I've built and written and learned about software since I was 20 years old, if I see people gaming on software, even playing solitaire, I'm thinking, what a waste of life, right? It does my head in. So I only ever use software that is of use to me, and a lot of it is all about how do you express yourself the best. So I do not waste energy on a screen. I only use the screen for managing my life, which might be Outlook or things like Miro, where we can sort of plan out and process and stuff like that. So anything that is productive, I like and I use, but I don't like having any more than 3 systems that exist in my life, because otherwise you're just here, there and everywhere, and it just all becomes too confusing and chaotic. Yeah,
brilliant. Okay, good stuff.
Oh, sorry, there is one other one.
Oh yeah.
Anything that helps me improve my golf handicap.
Well, what is it? What is it now?
Well, it's done quite well because I'm in Portugal. I play a lot of golf. So I started 10 years ago, and I've been at 20. I was at 28 for about 8 of those years, but I'm now down to 14. So I'm on the journey.
Yeah, excellent. No, that's impressive. You got to really work at. Talent will get you down to something like 18, won't it? But get you any lower, you really got to work.
Yeah. You have really got to work.
Yeah. Good. No, well done. What's the next 5 years hold for you? Well, if we're talking again in 5 years' time, what does success look like for you?
Well, it's really interesting because the business is still going great guns, and the business has grown with a very, very strong team that's taking that business. So my job now is the Chief Inspiring Officer. That's essentially all I do. And but what my passion has been since writing the book and getting the responses that I did to the book, my passion has now become sharing knowledge. So some people say to me, what are you going to do in the next 5 years? Well, my ideal outcome is to be a motivational speaker.
Right.
And that's the journey I'm on. I'm learning my craft now with a view to being able to execute in 6 years or 5 years. But what's interesting is I've got my first gig in Malta in a couple of weeks' time. I've got to go and do a keynote to 5 large different organisations. So I'm excited but nervous all at the same time.
Well, fantastic! I'm sure you'll smash it. No, good luck with that. All right, and from a marketing tactic, last quick fire question. Really, what's your most successful lead generation tactic when you've been with Cloud FM? What works the best?
So that's probably the worst question, or we're the worst company to ask that question to, because we've never employed a salesman in our lives, right. And we've never tried to lead generate in our lives. All we have done is basically said, everything we've done is basically, because we had the lucky that we only wanted a small number of large clients. We weren't trying to find 10 or 20 clients a week or a month or a year, right? So all we had to do was focus on what we were doing and just simply, through social media, is publicize the outcome of the case study. And that just brought people to us. Yeah. And that's all we ever did.
Yeah. So case studies, client recommendations, yeah, key thing. Brilliant. Yeah. It's been. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. I know that people listening will find it incredibly invaluable. You've got your book doing the opposite. That's available on all the usual places, is it?
Yep, Amazon. Yep, it's been available. I published it in I think March 2021. In December 13th, 2021, it hit number 1 globally on Amazon, which blew me away. And yes, it's available on Amazon all over the world.
Brilliant. And that's taking more of your story, and as you said, you don't like these teaching books, but it's based around your story. Yeah,
correct. Yeah.
Great.
And it's available in ebook and also Audible, where I narrate it, so you'd have to listen to my dulcet tones.
Lovely, superb. And if people would like to get hold of you, know more, where should we point them?
Well, there's a number of areas subject to your level of curiosity. There's my website, which is about me and my story, which is jeffdewing.co.uk. There's the podcast, which is also at jeffdewing.co.uk and select podcasts. Or there's the company, which is cloudfmgroup.com. Alternatively, the podcast this year, season 3, we were always on audio only. We're now also doing, on top of audio only, on your favourite podcast channel, we're also doing it on YouTube, where you can actually watch and see the guests. And you just go onto YouTube and search Jeff Dewing.
Yeah, fantastic. Jeff, thank you very much indeed for being my guest on ScaleUp Radio today.
No problem at all. Great to meet you.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.